I'm Daphne, and this is my story. It all started on a regular day aboard Flight 742, cruising at 35,000 feet somewhere over the Midwest. I'm a flight attendant. Been doing this for a couple of years now since I graduated from college. University of Texas, class of 22, proud Longhorn alum. Anyway, let me tell you a bit about myself before I get into what happened that day. I'm 26, blonde, naturally, thank you very much, and I've always been told I've got that all-American look. My hair's long, wavy, and falls just past my shoulders. I'm pretty tall, about 5'8", with a fit, athletic build. I used to run track in college, and I still hit the gym regularly. Keeps me toned and strong, which helps when you're lugging carry-ons into overhead bins all day. My eyes are this bright blue that people always compliment, and I've got a smile that, well, let's just say it's gotten me out of a few tricky passenger situations. That day, I was feeling good. I'd slipped into my uniform, a crisp navy skirt and blazer combo that hugged my curves just right. Underneath, I had on a white lace bra and matching panties. Simple but cute, you know? My nails were freshly painted too. White, my absolute favorite color for polish. It's clean, classy, and makes my hands look elegant when I'm pointing out the exits or handing out snacks. Oh, and my feet? Size 7 in American measurements, which is like a 38 in European sizes. They're small but strong. Years of running and yoga will do that. I'd slipped them into my standard black pumps, heels just high enough to look professional, but not kill me after a 12-hour shift. So there I was, strutting down the aisle, feeling pretty darn confident. I mean, I know I'm attractive. People tell me all the time. Passengers sneak glances, and I catch the occasional, "Wow, you're stunning," from a chatty first-class flyer. It's flattering, sure, but I'm here to do my job, not fish for compliments. Anyway, that day, I had a question about our landing schedule. Nothing major, just a little clarification for the crew. So, I made my way up to the cockpit. I knocked lightly, and Captain Jake's voice came through deep and smooth. "Come on in, Daphne." I pushed the door open, and there he was, Captain Jake Miller, all 6'2" of him, leaning back in his seat, hands steady on the controls. He's in his late 30s, with dark hair just starting to gray at the temples, and these piercing green eyes that could probably see right through you. He's got that rugged pilot vibe, broad shoulders, a jawline that could cut glass, and this quiet confidence that fills the room. I'd always thought he was handsome, but up close? Phew, it hit different. "Hey, Captain," I said, flashing my usual smile. "Just wanted to check on our ETA for Denver. Passengers are asking." He turned his head, and those green eyes locked onto mine. "Should be about 90 minutes out," he said, his voice low and steady. "Weather's clear, so we're on track." Then he paused, and I swear I saw a flicker of something in his expression. "You look sharp today, Daphne." I laughed, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "Thanks, just doing my thing. You're not looking too bad yourself up here." He smirked, just a little, but enough to make my stomach flip. "Long day," he said. "Could use some company to keep me awake." "Company, huh?" I teased, leaning against the doorframe. "What, the co-pilot's not cutting it?" The co-pilot, Tom, chuckled from his seat. "I'm chopped liver over here, apparently." Jake shot him a look, then turned back to me. "Tom's great, but he doesn't have your charm." Okay, now I was blushing. I mean, I'm used to flirting passengers, but this was Captain Jake. There's something about a guy in a pilot's uniform, especially one who knows how to fly a 737 like it's an extension of himself, that just gets under your skin. "Well," I said, playing it cool, "I've got a few minutes before the next drink run. What's on your mind, Captain?" He leaned back a little more, resting one hand on the armrest. "Tell me something about you, Daphne. Something I don't know." I tilted my head, thinking. Okay, did you know I ran the 400 meter in college? Almost made it to nationals." "No kidding," he said, eyebrows lifting. "That explains the energy. You've got that runner's build. Lean, strong." Now he was checking me out, and I didn't mind one bit. "Thanks," I said, shifting my weight so my hip popped just a little. "Gotta stay fit for this job. What about you? Any hidden talents?" "I play guitar," he said, almost casually, like it wasn't a big deal. Used to jam with a band back in flight school. Seriously? That's hot. I mean, cool. I corrected myself, laughing. You'll have to play for me sometime. His eyes sparkled. Maybe I will. You free after we land? My heart skipped a beat. Was he asking me out? Depends, I said, keeping it flirty. You buying the drinks? I stepped out of the cockpit, my pulse racing. The rest of the flight, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Those eyes, that voice, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only person in the world. After we landed in Denver, I freshened up in the crew lounge, touching up my white nail polish and slipping off my heels to stretch my size 7 feet. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, blonde hair still perfect, uniform still crisp, and thought, yeah, I've got this. Later that night, Jake and I met up at this little bar near the airport. He was out of his uniform in a black Henley that showed off his arms, and I'd changed into a fitted sweater and jeans. Over beers, we talked about my college days, his guitar gigs, and how we both ended up in the sky. The chemistry was off the charts, and when he walked me to my hotel room after, he paused at the door. So, he said, voice low, think we'll make a habit of this? I smiled, stepping closer. Only if you play me that guitar next time. He laughed, brushing a thumb along my jaw. You're trouble, Daphne. And you love it, I shot back. He didn't argue. And that, my friends, was just the beginning. So after that little cockpit flirt fest with Captain Jake, I couldn't get him out of my head. The rest of the flight to Denver was a blur, serving drinks, calming down a nervous flyer, the usual. But every time I passed the galley near the front, I'd sneak a glance toward the cockpit door, wondering what he was thinking up there. Those green eyes of his, they were burned into my brain. About an hour out from landing, the seatbelt sign flicked off and things calmed down in the cabin. I was adjusting my hair in the tiny galley mirror, still blonde, still flawless, when the intercom buzzed. It was Jake's voice, low and casual. Daphne, you got a sec? Could use a hand up here. I raised an eyebrow at my reflection. A hand, huh? Tom, the co-pilot, was still up there, so this wasn't some emergency. Smiling to myself, I smoothed my skirt, checked my white nail polish, still perfect, and headed to the cockpit. I knocked once, and Jake's voice came through. Come in. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Jake was still in his captain's chair, but he'd loosened his tie a little, and his posture was more relaxed. Tom glanced over with a smirk. I'll, stretch my legs, he said, unbuckling. You two behave. Always, I shot back, grinning as he slipped out. Now it was just me and Jake. He turned his chair slightly, looking up at me with that half smile that made my knees weak. Long day, he said, rolling his shoulders. This seat's killing my back. I stepped closer, hands on my hips. Poor Captain. Need a little TLC? His eyes glinted. You offering? Maybe, I teased, tilting my head. What's in it for me? He leaned back, stretching his arms in a way that pulled his shirt tight across his chest. How about gratitude from the guy keeping this plane in the air? I laughed. Fine, twist my arm, turn around. He shifted in his seat, facing the controls again, and I stepped up behind him. My hands hovered for a second, size 7 feet in those pumps, white polish gleaming under the cockpit lights, before I rested them on his shoulders. He was tense, muscles tight under his crisp white shirt. I started kneading gently, working my thumbs into the knots. God, that's good, he murmured, letting his head tip back a little. Told you I'm full of surprises, I said, keeping my voice light. But honestly, touching him like this, feeling the warmth of him through the fabric, was doing things to me. My pulse was racing, and I hoped he couldn't hear it. After a minute, he reached up and tugged at his tie. Mind if I lose this? He asked, glancing back at me. Go for it, I said, my voice a little breathier than I meant it to be. He pulled the tie off slow, letting it drop to the co-pilot's seat, then started unbuttoning the top of his shirt. One button, two, revealing a hint of tanned skin underneath. I kept massaging, but my eyes were glued to his movements. He shrugged the collar open a bit, and I caught a whiff of his cologne, something woodsy and masculine that made my head spin. Better? I asked, leaning in just enough that my blonde hair brushed his shoulder. Much, he said, voice dropping low. He turned his head slightly, and suddenly his face was inches from mine. You've got magic hands, Daphne. I smirked, lowering my voice to a whisper. You haven't seen anything yet. His breath hitched, and for a second, we just stared at each other. Then he whispered back, keep that up, and I might forget how to fly this thing. Don't you dare, I said, laughing softly, but I didn't pull away. My hand slid down a little, working the tension out of his upper back, and he let out this quiet groan that sent a shiver down my spine. Daphne, he murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. You're making it real hard to focus. Good, I whispered, my lips close to his ear. Keeps you awake, right? He chuckled, deep and warm. Yeah, awake's one way to put it. I gave his shoulders one last squeeze, then stepped back, trying to play it cool even though my heart was pounding. There, all better? He turned fully now, shirt still open at the collar, tie gone, looking every bit like some rugged pilot fantasy. Not quite, he said, eyes locked on mine. But it's a start. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall with a grin. What's next, Captain? You gonna ask for a foot rub? He laughed, leaning forward. Don't tempt me. Those size 7s of yours might just do the trick. Size 7 and fabulous, I corrected, wiggling my fingers to show off my white polish. But you'll have to wait till we're on the ground for that. Deal, he said, his gaze lingering. Denver's gonna be interesting. Count on it. I shot back, then turned to head out, letting my hips sway just a little as I left. I could feel his eyes on me the whole way, and when I glanced back, he was still watching, that smirk firmly in place. The rest of the flight, let's just say I was counting the minutes till landing, and not just because my shift was almost over. So there I was, still buzzing from that flirty little massage session with Captain Jake. My hands were tingling from working his shoulders, and my head was all over the place. I mean, how could it not be? The guy was charm personified, and I was falling for it hard. But by the time I'd stepped back from him, I was starting to feel the day catch up with me. My size 7 feet were aching in those pumps, even with their perfect white polish, and my legs were screaming from hours of standing. Being a flight attendant is glamorous until you realize how much it takes out of you. I leaned against the cockpit wall, catching my breath. Okay, Captain, I said, fanning myself with one hand. I think I'm tapped out. You're on your own now. Jake turned in his seat, shirt still unbuttoned at the collar, that rugged grin still in place. You sure? I could get used to this VIP treatment. I laughed, but it was weaker than before. Yeah, well, this VIP's about to collapse. Long day. He nodded, his green eyes softening. You've earned a break. Go sit down for a bit. I was about to sass him back, something about how he didn't get to boss me around, but then it happened. The plane jolted. Not a little bump, but a sharp, stomach-dropping lurch that made me grab the door frame. The controls beeped and a warning light flashed on the panel. Jake, I said, my voice spiking. What was that? He spun back to the controls, hands flying to the yoke, but his brow furrowed. Hang on. Hang on? I stepped closer, panic creeping in. What do you mean, hang on? You're supposed to know what's happening. I do. I did, he muttered, flipping switches and scanning the screens. Just give me a second. A second? My heart was in my throat now. Jake, did you forget how to fly this thing? He shot me a look, half annoyance, half embarrassment. No, I didn't forget. I just got distracted. Distracted? I squeaked, clutching the co-pilot's seat. By what? Me rubbing your shoulders? Oh my God, we're gonna crash because I gave you a massage. We're not crashing, he snapped, but his voice wasn't as steady as I wanted it to be. The plane dipped again and I yelped, my blonde hair flying into my face as I stumbled. Daphne, sit down. I'm not sitting down while you figure out how to not kill us, I yelled, my hands shaking. I could see the clouds whipping past outside, and all I could think was, this is it. I'm done. My white nail polish is gonna be the prettiest thing they find in the wreckage. Daphne, breathe, he said, his tone sharper now. I've got it. Just, damn it, where's Tom? The co-pilot. Right. He'd left to stretch his legs and hadn't come back. Another jolt rocked us, and I swear I saw Jake's hands tremble for a split second before he gripped the controls tighter. Okay, he muttered, more to himself than me. Airspeed's fine. Altitude's crap. We're losing a little. Losing altitude? I shrieked. Jake, fix it! I'm trying, he barked, flipping another switch. The plane leveled out a bit, but my legs were jelly and my chest was tight. I'd never been this scared in my life, not even when I tripped during a college track meet in front of 500 people. I can't deal with this, I stammered, backing toward the door. You're freaking me out, and I'm freaking out, and I need to not be here. Daphne, wait, he started, but I was already fumbling with the handle. Nope, I said, shaking my head. You figure this out, Captain. I'm out. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the galley, slamming it shut behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and my hands were clammy as I braced myself against the counter. The plane felt steady again, mostly, but I wasn't taking any chances. I slid down to the floor, pulling my knees up and burying my face in my hands. What the hell just happened? I whispered to myself. 1 minute, I'm flirting with the hottest pilot I've ever met, and the next, I'm convinced we're about to be a headline on CNN. My perfect blonde hair was a mess, my uniform was wrinkled, and I was pretty sure I'd smudged my white polish gripping the doorframe. I stayed there for a few minutes, catching my breath, listening to the hum of the engines. No more jolts, no more beeps, at least not that I could hear. Eventually I peeked up, half expecting to see passengers staring at me, but the curtain was drawn and the cabin was quiet. Okay, Daphne, I muttered, pushing myself up. Pull it together, you're fine, he's fine, we're not crashing. But I wasn't going back in that cockpit. Not yet. I needed a ginger ale, a seat, and maybe a prayer or two before I faced Jake again. Whatever had just gone down, one thing was clear. This flight was turning into way more than I'd bargained for.